Well, it's been a very busy year for chemical and mining services producer Orica. With the demerger of Dulux behind it, Orica today posted a net profit after tax and material items of $642 million, which, if you take out the Dulux contribution last year, was an increase of 4%. It's welcome news for the company, with chemical leaks delivering some bad publicity in the last couple of months. Outgoing Managing Director and CEO of Orica, Graeme Liebelt, joins me now. Graeme, welcome to the programme.
Thanks, Dickie.
Well, the market obviously liked it. Your shares were up over 4% and driven, I suppose not surprisingly, very much by a record performance in mining services.
Yes, the mining services business had a pretty good year in the circumstances. Plenty of headwinds with currency and rains and the like, but basic volumes were pretty good, particularly towards the end of the year, and our pricing environment still allowed us to improve our pricing a little bit. So overall, a good result, I thought.
Do you feel the Aussie miners took your business willingly? Because there was some criticism earlier in the year that they weren't really buying Australian.
Yes, well, we're a global company now, and we deal with many of the Aussie miners on a global basis, frankly. So what they need in Australia, they buy in Australia, and what they need elsewhere, they'll buy elsewhere as well. And I think that's part of the advantage of being
big.
One of those businesses that's been able to extend globally.
Indeed. You're forecasting profit growth for the year ahead as well. Given the outlook for the commodities boom, uncertainties in Europe, you're quite confident about how things are going to turn out for Orica?
Yes, we feel fairly confident. The real issue for us is really about the Chinese market and the other big developing economies, frankly.
Well, there have been questions and more questions about China's growth story.
There have, actually, and but we're one of those that are reasonably confident about that. We think the Chinese government has been able to slow down the economy towards a soft landing rather than a hard landing as it deals with some inflationary pressures. All of that seems to be going quite well, and we feel reasonably confident that China can keep that going. But, of course, the uncertainties elsewhere in the world needs careful watching.
One analyst I spoke to seemed to think that for Orica, volume growth was actually much more important than a direct increase in commodity prices. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's true. So we're really exposed to the volume of mining rather than the commodity prices themselves. And volumes, as it happens, prove to be less volatile than the commodity prices themselves, and I think our outlook for 2012, just subject to China continuing to grow reasonably well, is quite positive, in fact.
What about the Australian dollar? Because that's been quite tough for you in this last year. When I last spoke to you, I think you were hedged through to last month, to September. The dollar is now back a little bit at 103. It was at 110. What's the impact on the bottom line, and what's your hedging strategy going forward?
Well, we've got two types of hedging in place. One is for transactional exposures. When we enter those transactions, we typically take out the hedging at the time of entering the transaction. And then we hedge translational exposure. In other words, the translation of our earnings from overseas in other currencies back into Australian dollars. We hedge that inside our financial year starting in October. So fortunately, we're able to hedge those for 2012 at reasonable rates of about 98 cents back in the first few weeks of October. So that worked out well for us.
Let's go to your problem child, Minova. Bought for $857 million 5 years ago, a 29% drop in EBIT this year. At what point do you think the board would consider just cutting it all together and selling it and getting out of the States?
I think the board keeps us under fairly constant review. About half of the drop was due to currency, but putting that aside, we are having some considerable difficulty with maintaining margins in the United States, where there's a very strong price competition going on.
Have you got steel prices still an issue?
Steel price is still an issue in the United States for us, so we've been so far unable to rebuild those margins, and that's an ongoing issue for us. Presumably
some of your big competitors in the US would be more than happy to try and buy you out.
Not sure about that. We are amongst the biggest in the US in this market. There's two of us as big players in that market, and the structure of the market actually looks reasonable, but it's been quite difficult. We think it's bottomed out, and we think it will improve 2012 on 2011. But I guess that remains to be seen. We're reasonably confident, though.
OK. Then, of course, what every chemical company dreads, a leak. A couple of months ago of chromium-6 at your plant near Stockton. Now, it attracted everybody from Erin Brockovich to the Premier of New South Wales, and the government report found the 3-day delay in notifying the public was unacceptable. What lessons have you taken out of this?
Well, the first lesson, of course, is to prevent such a thing happening in the first place. So there were some design changes that left something to be desired there, and really the first thing that we have to deal with is to make sure that that never happens again.
Because it was completely unforeseen, wasn't it? Unexpected.
It was unforeseen. This particular issue with chromium is known about, but we had not foreseen that we would potentially overwhelm the containment systems, and that's what's happened here. The second thing to be learnt is that it took us about 16 hours to report, which is within the law, we think, which says that we must report as soon as practicable. But the reality is we wish we had have made the call to the authorities sooner. And I think the legislation will change such that we will, by law, have to do that, but we would want to do that anyway.
The report certainly felt so. And then, but by coincidence, or some would say, it's, there are questions now about systemic problems. You then had the arsenic leak in the Hunter River, and then mercury vapours at the Botany site. To what extent could this damage the reputation of Orica coming so quickly?
Well, there's no doubt that our reputation has been damaged as a consequence of the Newcastle incident. I believe the other two incidents are different in their nature, in that they are licence non-compliances, and the limits on those licences are set very low. In other words, they are a kind of early warning system. And the fact that we've been able to detect mercury in one of those tests at the boundary of our Botany site meant that we could deal with the issue immediately without any danger to the community, and that's the way the system's meant to work.
You're now retiring with a new CEO, Ian Smith, announced last month. I see the ASX as being a bit premature. He's got him listed there at CEO already. But let me ask you, what is your greatest success looking back? Is it the Dyno Nobel acquisition? What's been the biggest thing for you?
Look, I think that acquisition was part of it. But I'd point to two things. One is really that we've made a great success of our involvement in the explosives industry. And established a world-leading position in that sector, which I think is something to be proud of. But the second thing is the reshaping of the Orica business generally. Until 1997, a subsidiary of ICI, then to have reshaped the portfolio to be exposed to mining and a global player and a global leader.
Graeme Liebelt, it's been great to interview you while you've been CEO. I hope you enjoy your time, perhaps as a non-executive director on a few boards. Good luck, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tiggy.